Johnny Unitas is one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the National Football League, and he might be the greatest quarterback of all time to play the sport in the pre-merger era. There's a reason as to why he's so highly regarded today, and there's a reason why he made it into the Pro Football Hall of Fame on the first ballot as one of the greatest to ever do it. The man made it to 10 Pro Bowls, won a Super Bowl, won a handful of NFL championships, led the league in passing yards 4 times, and led the league in passing touchdowns in 4 consecutive seasons from 1957 to 1960, all while winning 3 MVP awards, winning the award in 1959, 1964, and 1967. He was so good that, to this day, he is one of just 6 players in NFL history to win at least 3 MVPs from the Associated Press. Anyone that saw Johnny Unitas play can attest to the fact that the man was a legend, and during an era where it was really tough to play quarterback, he looked like he was playing an entirely different sport with how good he was and how much he guided those Colts offenses to success. When you retire with over 40,000 passing yards, making you the #1 quarterback in NFL history in that category at the time, and making you 7,000 yards ahead of second place, and when you retire with 290 passing touchdowns, making you the #1 quarterback in NFL history in that category at the time, and making you 41 touchdowns ahead of second place, and when you retire with 2,830 passes completed, making you the #1 quarterback in NFL history in that category at the time, and making you nearly 400 completions ahead of second place, you did something right, and you were a heck of a player. However, for as good as Johnny Unitas was, there's another side to his legacy that you might not know about, that obviously was not his fault, but deserves a deep dive today more than half a century later. Because in 1972, Johnny Unitas was involved in the dumbest trade rumor of all time. I don't mean that it was dumb in the subjective sense, as in, no way any team would ever go for this, because let's be honest, value is subjective. And if the Packers were dumb enough to trade their future away around that time for an aging John Hadl, I guess anything was possible. And I don't mean that this was just some random person propose something in the newspaper, or a hack of a writer, or a random person. I mean a prominent sports journalist, and one of the biggest in the industry, said that a Johnny Unitas trade was imminent, even though it was physically not possible. Imagine if Adam Schefter announced on Christmas that the Baltimore Ravens were in the process of trading Lamar Jackson to the Carolina Panthers for the end of the season. That's the type of prominence, stupidity, and impossibility due to the NFL bylaws that we're talking about here. Because this is the story behind what has to be, without a doubt, of the many trade rumors to happen throughout NFL history, the dumbest trade rumor of them all. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. Because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one that you may not have heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing, and for helping us grow this community. And with that in mind, let's talk about the trade that wasn't. Before I talk about the rumor in question, and just how insane it was, we need some context to understand how we got to this point. As in, what was happening with this man right here during the 1972 season. To say that 1972 was a tumultuous year for the Baltimore Colts would be putting it lightly, as after years of good football throughout the late 1950s, the 1960s, and the early 1970s, 1972 was the year that it all fell apart. I'm not going to dive too much into the weeds of everything, because this video would be an hour long if I explained everything that went wrong for the Colts, and all the dysfunction there. So here's just a quick summary of it all. Carroll Rosenblum, the previous owner of the Colts, who was quite good at his job, traded ownership of the team to Robert Irsay, with Rosenblum now owning the Rams, and Irsay now owning the Colts. And he was really bad at his job. He fired head coach Don McCafferty 5 weeks into the season, and meddled in a ton of affairs that he had no business meddling in. And when McCafferty got fired, so did Johnny Unitas. Unitas was 39 years old and was very clearly on the decline, starting with a shocking loss during the opening week of the season against the St. Louis Cardinals, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner, and culminated with a shutout loss to the Dallas Cowboys where, once again, Unitas did not play well. Through 5 games, Unitas threw 4 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, and was well below what we were accustomed to seeing. To be fair, you never really saw quarterbacks play as late as Unitas did back then, so just the fact that he was still starting games in the NFL was somewhat of a minor miracle. But his time was running out, and when McCafferty got fired, new head coach John Sandusky handed the reins of the team over to Marty Domres, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. For the final 9 games of the 1972 season, the former first-round pick of the San Diego Chargers, Marty Domres, was leading the Colts, with Unitas just watching on the bench, frustrated about everything. Unitas was treated like crap in 1972 by upper management. The relationship between he and the team was about as fractured as it could possibly be, and it was pretty apparent that 1972 was going to be his last season in Baltimore, because after that season, he'd either retire or would find life on a brand new team. But what if he got traded in the middle of 1972 after being benched? Because on November 8th, a report by Jim Healy of KLAC came out and said that Unitas wasn't going to be a Colt for much longer. Now, before going any further, when talking about the man you've been watching this whole time, Jim Healy was no slouch. This was an incredibly prominent reporter working in one of the largest markets in the country in Los Angeles. Healy was the guy for sports on the West Coast, and he is still remembered to this day, seeing as he has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It's not like this was some random person or your neighbor with no sources saying that Johnny Unitas was on the verge of being traded. This was the top guy for sports radio, and a man that definitely had connections and sources. It'd be like if Mike Greenberg broke something today. And he said, in no uncertain terms, that Washington was working on a trade that would send Johnny Unitas from Baltimore to the nation's capital. You might ask, why Washington? Well, 2 reasons. Number 1, head coach George Allen loved veteran players. He loved those proven commodities, to the point of trading away just about every draft pick he had for the surefire thing of a veteran, established player, which was a strategy that worked extremely well for him at a time when there was no salary cap. Allen had always been infatuated with Unitas, especially seeing as Allen used to be the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams, and with the Baltimore Colts in the same division as the Rams for a while, being in the Coastal Division, Allen saw Unitas in person twice a year, and became acquainted with him and knew how good he was. Number 2, Washington just had a bad injury at quarterback and needed someone to fill the void, as their starting quarterback throughout October, Sonny Jurgensen, tore his Achilles and would miss the rest of the season, which forced Billy Kilmer into the starting role. Allen viewed Unitas as an upgrade over Kilmer and needed a strong, competent, veteran signal caller to help potentially guide Washington to their first Super Bowl appearance in franchise history. With that, the wheels were in motion. Washington needed a quarterback, and Johnny Unitas was done in Baltimore. So Jim Healy reported live on the air that he had sources that this deal was close to happening. As Healy said, George Allen and the Colts are close to arranging a deal. Adding on that, George Allen loves the veteran ball player, and with Sonny Jurgensen out for the season, and maybe for life, Unitas could be valuable to the Redskins. He also added that the deal was in the works, so it wasn't just an idea or a concept floating around. The teams were talking, and it was going to be done soon. Johnny Unitas was going to be leaving Baltimore and was going to be joining Washington mid-season in a trade that was about to send shockwaves around the National Football League. Heck of a scoop by Healy, and a heck of a thing to report on. However, there was just one small problem with this trade rumor. There was just one teeny tiny problem with this trade rumor that was floating around that was proposed by the legendary Jim Healy that we need to talk about. Just one minor detail, not a big issue in the grand scheme of things, but oh yeah, this trade literally was not possible. This trade literally could not happen. This trade was illegal. If I made up a trade rumor that Patrick Mahomes was going to be traded from the Kansas City Chiefs to the Pittsburgh Steelers, as stupid and as nonsensical as this rumor would be, and as much as I'd be mocked for it, at least that'd be more realistic than this. Because there is a universe where that could happen. As in, there is nothing stopping the Chiefs from being dumb enough or drunk enough to do that. Here, Washington and Baltimore, even if they wanted to, literally could not make the trade for Johnny Unitas mid-season. You see, back in the early 1970s, there was a rule that heavily restricted trading between conferences, much like there was in baseball between the American League and the National League. If you were an AFC team and you wanted to make a trade with an NFC team, you had to do it super quickly, as in before the first preseason game. The interconference trade deadline in 1972 was August 1st, and seeing as Baltimore was in the AFC and Washington was in the NFC, any trade for Johnny Unitas would have had to be completed before the start of August. Now, personally, this rule was absolutely stupid and received a ton of criticism. Whereas it at least makes sense in Major League Baseball because the American League and the National League were two separate entities, the NFC and the AFC were not two separate entities. They operated under the same commissioner and the same rules and regulations. In the days of the AFL and the NFL, I got it. But after the merger, this should not have been a thing. Still, the rule was in place. So even if Baltimore and Washington wanted to make a trade because they were in two separate conferences, the deadline to do that passed more than 3 months ago. They needed to do it while everyone was on summer vacation, not while everyone was in school and when daylight savings took effect. So let's get that out of the way with this Unitas trade proposal. It literally could not happen because of the interconference trading rule making it illegal. But even if Baltimore and Washington were in the same conference, and even if the August 1st deadline wasn't a thing, guess what? This trade would still be illegal and wouldn't be allowed to go through. Because the actual trade deadline was October 24th, and this rumor was reported on the night of Wednesday, November 8th. We were over 2 weeks past the trade deadline, and Jim Healy is out there saying, oh yeah guys, Johnny Unitas, he's on the verge of getting traded to another team in the state of Maryland, and it's gonna happen soon. How is that possible? It's like if the deadline to drop a class in college is after the second week of a semester, and it's the 7th week, and you're saying, I heard this person's about to drop the class. Not how that works. The trade deadline is a hard deadline. If trades aren't official by the time of the deadline on October 24th, and especially August 1st, then they don't go through. So the fact that you thought this trade was happening when it was November 8th is absolutely moronic to me. But, okay, maybe Healy was talking about a trade like this getting done after the season. Maybe we have different definitions of what words like soon and imminent mean. And maybe coming days means something like the days on that planet in Interstellar. Maybe time is a social construct, and Healy wasn't talking about the trade happening in 1972, and I'm overreacting to this because Healy is talking about a trade happening after the 1972 season is done. But I can't even say that. He doesn't get the benefit of the doubt on this one. Why? Because of the part where Healy said that Sonny Jurgensen was out for the season and they needed a quarterback. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to put 2 and 2 together on that one. Jurgensen is a quarterback. He's injured. He's out for the season. Baltimore potentially has a quarterback available. George Allen wants to make the trade because of that. It's like if Joe Burrow gets injured in September, and I say, with Burrow out for the season due to an injury, the Bengals are in the market for a quarterback, and I heard they're close on a deal with the Commanders to acquire Jaden Daniels. I can't say, well, obviously, I didn't mean this season, I meant a deal for next season. Not even close to how this works. The implication was obvious, and the language was obvious, especially with all the surrounding context of the two sides being close on a deal. So this grand trade rumor of yours involving one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, these sources that you supposedly have, completely made up, completely false, and completely fabricated, because this trade quite literally could not happen. Which is why it's going to come as no surprise whatsoever that, shocker, this trade did not happen, and the Colts strongly and bluntly denied that a trade like this was in the works. Probably because even if they were considering it, and even if it made sense for both sides, it would literally not even be allowed. As Colts general manager Joe Thomas said on the trade rumors, "How could I make a deal?" And yeah, that's a pretty good response. How could he make a deal when he trades someone way past the trade deadline? Not just the league deadline, but the interconference deadline. You can't make a deal. But Thomas continued, saying, "Nobody has talked to me about a deal," which again, I'm not surprised by. Because I think if Washington's front office called Thomas up and asked him about a trade for immediate quarterback help when that trade was literally not possible, Thomas would hang up the phone and file a grievance with the league. He continued, saying, "You get this all the time on a player of Unitas' stature. Everybody is trading Unitas except the one person who can trade him, me. I want Johnny Unitas here the rest of the year. After that, we'll sit down and talk." So that basically covered it and squashed the rumor right in its tracks. Johnny Unitas was not getting traded in 1972, and the report by Jim Healy was not true. Probably because even if we wanted to trade him, we legally could not. We have a better chance of signing Airbud Multi-Pooch Kick as our punter than we have at trading Johnny Unitas, because at least there's no rule that says a dog can't play football, while there is a hard and fast rule about trading guys weeks and, in this case, months past the trade deadline. In fact, there's multiple rules about it. It's not possible. Now, that's not to say that Johnny Unitas wouldn't eventually get traded. I think everyone knew by this point that the writing was on the wall for the Colts, and it was going to be a long and painful rebuild, and that they were going to have to look toward the future and look toward a life without the aging and declining Johnny Unitas. As in the offseason, Unitas was traded to the San Diego Chargers, where the 40-year-old looked like a shell of himself, completing just 44% of his passes while throwing 3 touchdowns and 7 interceptions, and looking like one of the worst quarterbacks in football, with his passer rating of 40 being among the 44 quarterbacks to throw at least 64 passes, 40th in the league, and not even half a point better than the infamous passer rating of 39.6. Unitas finally hung it up after the 1973 season, and today, he is remembered as a Colts legend, even if the ending to his time in Baltimore was bizarre and was definitely a little bit ugly and very rocky. But while he's remembered today as a player who played for Baltimore and San Diego, he's not remembered as a player who played on Washington during their NFC winning season in 1972, even despite the rumors of his trade to the nation's capital by Jim Healy. So as a word to the wise, if you're going to spread a trade rumor as a prominent sports analyst and say that you have sources on something happening, make sure that the thing in question is physically possible. If the thing that you're reporting on literally cannot happen due to the rules, restrictions, and regulations of the league, then you probably shouldn't report on it. And if you're reporting on a trade happening mid-season, when it's more than 3 months past the trade deadline, then you should probably look at another line of work and learn how to think a bit more critically. Because in 1972, Johnny U, despite the reports of one reporter, would not become Johnny DC. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name at the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.